Hi everyone. So we have Bryan here, which gives me amazing pleasure because I've been a really big fan of everything that Bryan does for few years now, and I think you're going to get a lot of value out of hearing him talk about his journey. So tell us in the shortest way possible where you are and who you are, Bryan. I know that that's the worst possible question, and there will be an intro, so you don't actually have to give people data, just an idea of how you want to describe yourself.
So I'm a value stream architect with Defense Unicorns right now. We work a lot on secure software delivery with helping mostly government agencies right now, but anybody who's interested in secure software delivery.
You know what I found super interesting, and I'll start with this one. Do you realize that there are many people in technology today that would not know what a value stream engineer is?
Oh yeah, I know, and I always point them to Mick Kirsten's blog post on value stream management and value stream architects and different roles. I think it's a really interesting job because you have to be not only understand how to architect things like how do we get a better test suite through the pipeline, but you also need to understand how to architect organizations around better flow and interact with people. So it's very technical and people-oriented job if you're doing it correctly. It's very, very challenging, especially for people like me who people do not come naturally to me.
I've heard you say that before and I don't agree at all. I've seen you interact with everyone and their dog, and you're an absolute natural. You're easy to follow as a leader. Your thoughts are supremely clear and easy to listen to. So I don't agree with your view on your people skills, but we don't have to.
It's a learned skill. You should have met me about 10 years ago.
Oh, I see. Wow. Congratulations then. And you should totally kind of compile how you manage that because it's a journey. And we were actually talking about this journey seconds ago. Tracy, Bryan, and I have had a couple of conversations. One of the things we were saying, and I'd like your take on this, is that not only are we nearing potentially a second wave of the kind of great resignation, whatever you want to call it, but we're nearing a worst wave where tech people are in danger more so than everywhere else, because the cognitive load during the pandemic, compiled with this kind of aftermath of it, compiled with all of our continuous challenges of trying to do technology at the cutting edge, are soon going to start becoming, and also in particular the fact that now the human work is mandatory and everyone kind of can tell that, whether if they ignore it, fine, but it's mandatory still. And she and I were thinking of, is this not going to be a wave of developers putting their hands up and saying, this, I can't, this is way too much. I need to move away. Maybe they'll start farming. Are we looking at a wave of tech people being burnout in different ways than just burnout?
Yeah, I don't know. I think really it's important for people to understand that they are getting burned out and to take measures to make sure they don't. I mean, there's things that companies can do to try to minimize that, but ultimately it's each of our responsibility to understand where we're at and either reach out for help or just say, look, these are my boundaries, right? And I've had to go through that myself, where I would, at one point give everything to, the company's mission. But at the end of the day, the company's the company and I'm me, and I need to make sure that I have boundaries where my life also matters. Right. I think it's very important for everybody to draw those boundaries for themselves.
Very, very true. And I think a lot of the time we feel some type of way about it, but it's basic self-care to remember what you stand for and what your brand is and what you're trying to accomplish, and kind of how does that impede in terms of kind of doing your best by the place you're at. So it's not an easy job, but I'm fascinated, as you know, with people like yourself and James and Karen and Tracy and so many others that are truly and genuinely powerful advocates who have spent their lives with their hearts in the right place. And I call those people superhumans and superheroes. And one of the things I'm doing, just to kind of give you a little bit of context, I know you've seen it, but just for the viewers, if they haven't heard that, I've always been of this idea that we have two different opposing sides, unfortunately, and this is where the people fall in the middle, this IT versus HR conversation on who should be owning the people. We've had this chat a couple of times, but I think that the way that we're putting it together these days has to be the way, and this kind of our efforts at PNT are with these interviews. Sorry about that. Everyone has had one of those before, I'm sure. These interviews that we do with superheroes are presented on the other newsletter, on the Chasing Psychological Safety newsletter, because it's the community that has to hear that the tech community has taken kind of lead on understanding interactions and dynamics in teams for kind of, let me ask you, why have you ever taken an interest in the people topic? Why even bother? Why not keep to technology and process?
They're tightly coupled. I mean, they just are. It's people work. You can't really deliver value without a team. And it takes interacting with people to build a good team. And, the journey I went on was, when we were first piloting continuous delivery, when I was at Walmart, I quickly realized that the way that I'd been taught to be a tech lead, which is do it my way, right? That wasn't going to work. That to really get the outcomes that I wanted, because I was put on that team. It was like, hey, let's go figure out continuous delivery at the team level. I'm like, okay, cool. And so I'm just reading the book, working with the other senior engineers in the area as we try to solve this problem. But it quickly became apparent that I had to get everybody's hearts and minds on the team involved and to pull them in, especially since they put me on a team where I wasn't familiar with the tech stack. I'd never worked in those languages before. So I was learning the languages. I was also trying to learn what process changes we had to make to how we worked as a team. And the only way I could do that was collaboratively. And it completely changed how I went about being a technical lead. The outcomes we saw from that was just a massive improvement in team morale and also outcomes for the end user. And so I just, I want that for everybody. It was an amazing experience. And so, I just drive that way. It's like, I've always been around, we need to improve things. We need to have less toil about our work. We need cleaner code and all that sort of stuff. But it's all related to also how the team works. And that became very clear during that experience.
So you worked out that doesn't work any other way is what it is. And it's what I keep telling people that is happening in the tech community. I don't know if they believe me, but it's genuinely what's happening. There's no CTO or COO that woke up one morning and thought, you know what, I'm going to focus on this people stuff. I'm not going to be doing technology anymore. What happened is they've tried to not focus on it. And it just does not work, does it?
But here's the important thing people need to understand, right? Is that if I'm in charge and you do what I say, then the outcomes will only be as good as my ideas and probably worse because you're not invested in my ideas. You're just doing what I say, right? But if we are collaborating towards solving a problem and we're all trying to solve the problem together and you're invested because, you understand the mission we're on and you're bought in on the mission that we're driving towards and you're trying to solve this problem, we're all working together to do it. The outcomes are way better. The ideas are much better than what any of us could come up with individually. The thing I'm working on right now, the tool I'm building around delivery metrics, I have very clear ideas about what I want. But I also engage the team and try to pull out their ideas because we wind up with better outcomes than if we just use my clear ideas. My ideas get better because they're our ideas that, the whole team's contributing to. And you have to engage people's minds if you want to go anywhere.
To be fair, a lot of people out there are working in positions today where collaboration is not as fundamental as it is in Agile. A lot of the things happening in the business world today, let's face it, we don't need them to happen. They're happening out of virtue of inertia, and that just processes no one has questioned. And most of those processes can be done individually or in a work group.
Well, but here's the thing: is what's the definition of success? Is it just accomplishing something or doing it well? Right? I mean, how much success do you want? Right? So yes, there's many things that I could accomplish and meet the definition of done for whatever thing, right? Individually in silos, we can do heroics. We can make sure that we have someone who's like an expert over here who knows everything, you know. And you can get things done that way, but it's not sustainable. It's not efficient, and it's definitely not going to get the best outcomes. You're
Right.
not going to be high performing. You may do a thing, but you won't do it at a high performing level. And if you have competition in the space who is, they will crush you.
Right. Which is exactly why I'm always shocked that it isn't at the very top level that people freak out about the human debt. Because that's where it really matters. That's where they should go. Oh no, I won't be around at this rate if I don't do better.
But it's training. I mean, look around you. How many companies do you see who don't just pretend like people doing the work are resources, replaceable cogs in the machine, right? It's very rare to find a company that understands that people actually matter.
Right. And also they sometimes veer. Have you noticed this? So there are companies who do embrace the ethos of people matter, but in a sense, because it's not coming from it went all the way the other side, if you wish, and it became just a goal in itself and a very moral goal, if you wish, a very theoretical idea that people matter and we should be just care about our people in general, in a selfless sort of people are nice sort of way, and not in a business imperative, because otherwise we will never compete with people who put people first, kind of imperative. And it's not sustainable. It doesn't work. We cannot fake our way to a nice place of morality. We have got to actually have some type of, I think, economical imperative as well. And it's there, like you say, you cannot have high performance without functional teams. So
yeah, the incentives absolutely matter. And wherever you're at, you have to find those, which incentives are we trying to drive? I worked for Walmart for a long time. And if everybody actually did what Sam Walton said that you should do as far as how to run a company, Sam Walton was DevOps back in the 60s. Yeah. His rules for business, his thoughts around how to treat the people who are doing the work. You can be very high performing if you just follow what Sam talked about and did.
Yeah. I mean, this is the drama of it to a degree, right? These things are common sense. The things we're talking about, that we're preaching about, right? They're complicated things, but they're also boiling down to very common sense human things, which are, we need to be decent to each other. We need to care that people have some type of...
The problem is that you can't show the change quarter to quarter, right? And if you're at a C-suite and your only focus is quarterly results and stock price instead of long-term growth, then why do you care, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, when you've got people coming in who's like, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stay here for 2 years and I'm going to bail out for a higher paying job. Yeah. If they're not in for the long term, they don't care.
Right. Right. Right.
People is a long-term problem.
Right. Very, very true. And it's also, again, we alternate so easily between, is this a team issue? Is it a me issue? Is it an organizational issue? And, we talk about this a lot in articles and on LinkedIn. I personally don't think an organization exists. It's this mythical unicorn and Santa Claus sort of thing. And the more we spend time talking about just the organization, the more time we're wasting in doing conversations about people's feelings and interactions in teams. But even then, there are some bits and pieces that are at an organizational level. And I think it's important for us to recognize that if you don't have structure and clarity, like Google says, you're not going to be able to lay out the type of interaction in a team that's going to be sustainable, no matter how hard you work on it. So there are some prerequisites at an organizational level that are needed, I think, so that the human debt kind of diminishes, this organizational permission sort of thing. And in those, like you said, do we not need new incentives? Do we not need new rewards? Do we not need new performance ways of looking at things? Do we not need to redefine what all are we doing here together as humans, and then how do we maintain that happening? Do you see that happening? Is there, let me ask you something. In your genius place, are you ever paid for the human work?
I think that the human work is part of all. I mean, we're all doing human work, whether it's being constructive or destructive all the time. You need to be very aware of that. I've written a paper for IT Revolution last year where I talked about a kind of an integrated approach to organizational improvement, and one of those things was an expansion of a blog post I wrote. We're talking about you can't change culture. What you can do is change the environment so that you're not going to be successful with the current culture, and then culture will shift, right? And so you have to be very deliberate about culture. I'm very, very lucky where I'm working right now that, Defense Unicorns, the founders wanted a specific culture. They had a very clear view of what that culture should be. And everything they do is around driving that culture so that you wind up working with a high-performing group of individuals who are all focused on our mission, their particular part of that mission, and want to work with each other, because we can't make the mission without tight collaboration. But it was a very deliberate choice. When you walk into an organization that has an established culture that's not like that, it's very hard to shift it. It's possible. But you have to be very deliberate about what are the cultural outcomes I want. You have to treat it just like in product development, right? Where it's like, okay, we need to make some small adjustments,
Right.
not assume that adjustment's going to work. We have a hypothesis that we make this adjustment, we'll get this sort of cultural shift. Let's try that and see what happens, and then measure.
Yes. Yeah.
And then adjust, right?
Yes.
But you have to be deliberate about it. And you have to understand that this is a strategic goal that every organization has to go after, so that they can, if they're in industry, they can improve their company performance, because their company will only perform at the level of the people doing the work.
Very true. Very, very true. It's incomprehensible in a sense that we're still having this conversation. And as I was saying this morning on a podcast, I don't think anyone listening to us doesn't know this. I feel like everything we say is a clear, known fact.
I don't think that that's true.
No?
I think a lot of the things that you and I talk about, so I focus a lot on improving the flow of value, and it's mostly people don't know. It's just ignorance of how things work as a system of delivery when you're doing product development and software. And I truly believe it's ignorance.
Unfortunately for me, I can't hang on to the same hope. I used to believe that, and I liked that feeling, because it felt like if I just wake up earlier and educate more people, or stick a feature that educates inside the product or something, one day we'll all get to the place where, yes, without psychological safety, you can't have high-performing teams. If you don't have high-performing teams, you cannot compete with these big guys. It's a simple message. It's not difficult. And the other message we have, which is slightly more complicated, is you have a lot of human debt. Figure out what it is, put some tickets on the backlog, start working on some behavior systematically. It isn't difficult. It's not brain surgery. It's just the lack of goodwill at the top to make these things happen. So they're not complicated messages. But even then, after 4 years of saying them, or 3 years of saying them, I feel everybody knows. I feel everybody's clear that's necessary. And
so, but see, we talked earlier of an example where somebody who wants these outcomes but still has blind spots, right?
Exactly.
And so this is something where this is the challenge for me as a software engineer when I was leading the Walmart dojo, was I had to understand I couldn't just tell somebody with something once. I had to say it the same way, like 10 times in a row, as if they were hearing it for the very first time, until a light bulb went off. Yes, I'm not Pollyanna. I know that there's bad actors out there that only care about themselves and don't care about whose graves they have to walk over to get to where they want to go. That's true, but that's not the majority of people. I truly believe the majority of the people who don't know these things are just need the facts presented to them in ways that eventually, if we present the facts in the right way, that a light bulb will go off.
I hope you're right. then again, the things that we're talking about, I feel like they are addressing themselves to the segments you were talking about earlier, who are very clearly just not that invested and not that long term and not there for long enough and not.
Yeah.
And I fear that there's an army of people out there hearing and going, yeah, but I'm not willing to put myself on the line like this Bryan fellow or like that Simon fellow. That's just suicidal on them. I'm fine where I am. I realize that's not going to make us into Netflix, but at the end of the day, I don't own 40% of this company, so that's fine. So I think there's a lot of that out there. But I was saying, even if we met people who genuinely didn't think were correct, if we met these like execs that said, look, I hear you, but for us, what we make, we don't need agile. We don't want agile. We don't want to go fast. We don't want to make this technology. So we don't need this people work that you're talking about. It's just us, how we do things. If there were someone out there that were in that position, I'd love to have a chat with them, because maybe I don't see that side of things, but I don't think there are out there many people that do believe that. I think they know, but they cannot find the courage like you do to kind of really be militant about the things that need doing.
Well, but some of that's self-defense. Number one, I personally am very stubborn, right? And so when I believe I'm on the right path, I'm going to keep driving down that path. Okay, you have to give me some hard evidence to show that I'm not on the right path for me to not to. I also want to make sure that I'm working in a good environment. So it's selfishness, right? We gave a talk at DevNexus about minimum viable continuous delivery and how focusing on solving these problems around continuous delivery will fix your organization. Okay. But we said the reason that we're so passionate about it is we might wind up working for your organization, and we don't want to have to come and fix it so that we can enjoy working there. We just want it to be a good place to work so that we want every developer's life to be better in case we have to work for you. Yeah. So it's self-defense. Everybody should be pushing for every place being a better place to work and trying to find ways to get that done, because we all are going to be changing jobs at some point.
Right, unless you're obviously very close to retirement and don't really care, and apparently there's some segment that does that as well.
And there's some people who just don't care and just work, and that's fine. But some of us want to enjoy the work, and so
I think most of us. I don't think it's some of us. I think it's most of us.
I would hope so.
Most people are good people. They have their hearts in the right place. If you give them the right tools and the right permission and empowerment, they will do even some more work. We don't want people to do too much work. We want people to do the work that matters. I think, how are you getting your own people in your company doing some of this hard work? I mean, surely, yes, you choose the right people. We had this conversation before. You're like very particular about who you get in, obviously. But once they're in, there must be people that must have been in many companies where they were asked to be professional. They were asked not to bring themselves. They had to be. There must be some that think that all of this chat about feelings is
honestly, I think everybody at my company tries to push that at whatever level they're at, whatever they're trying to do. They don't have to push it in my company, but pushing it with the companies we work with.
Where they are, yeah.
And how can we influence them so that they can get the outcomes they really need, that we're trying to help them achieve, right? And so everybody I talk to is always trying to find some way to push that message.
That's amazing to be surrounded by. I know what that's like. It's awesome to be surrounded by people who
this logo I have behind me, that's something I put together as kind of an homage to Gene Kim's The Unicorn Project, when he talks about the red shirts, right? The people on the ground who are taking the risks, the expendable people who are trying to change the organization. That's something else I talked about in that paper I mentioned before, was that every company has these people who care not only about the company's goals, but care about their coworkers and the place that they work, that their daily work is enjoyable or doesn't suck too hard, right? And those red shirts are something that you as an executive need to partner with and try to grow that thin red line, make it a wider red line, right? Because if you ignore them or abuse them, they go away, and then nobody cares about your company.
Yeah.
Right, except you, but you're not doing the work. Right? So, grow those red shirts. I'll say that
same segment that I call superheroes, but yes, absolutely lean on them, get them, help them.
And I've worked in environments where doing this kind of work was risky, okay, but didn't care because I couldn't tolerate not doing it,
Yeah.
right? But you step on enough toes on people above you, and there's consequences. And I've had consequences in the past, but I didn't care,
Right.
right? And I talked to Gene Kim about this one time. He said there's a certain level of not caring about consequences required
Right.
to be this kind of person. I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's true, right? I don't recommend it for everybody,
No.
but you can still, push in ways where it's not risky.
But it circles back. I think it circles back to what we said initially, which is if you're deliberate about feeling your boundaries, understanding who you are and what you bring and what your brand is and what your value is, I think you find that courage. And equally, if you're lucky enough to be in a psychologically safe team, you lean on each other for more of that courage to come together. So
yeah, I think if you're in a place where you have a lot of psychological safety, there's much less courage required. You're able to stand up and say, hey, what if we tried this? Or I see this as broken, right? It doesn't take a lot of courage. I mean, courage is doing something even though you're scared, right? But if you're not scared, then all it is us helping each other. It's
right.
not courage. It's just we're all working together to improve things.
There
And
are-
people shouldn't feel bad because it doesn't take courage. It shouldn't take courage. But it has, in my past, sometimes taken courage. I mean, there's things I do today that require courage, right? But that's the job.
That is the job. And I think if the world were populated with, I always say we should have more non-normies like me, places. Just I, for instance, I don't need a lot of courage. I need a lot of courage to shut up. So it's weighing heavier on me when I shut up about something than when I say it. So you get into that habit of someone has to be that, and it's a hard job, right? We should say this to our listeners, because I've seen people get into this red shirt / superhero line and push too hard, both themselves and around, and end up in this place of being really burned out, really keep fatigued, really fed up with the uselessness of it all. And it's a dramatic thing to see. A lot of people do that. It's because you need support. I mean, you live in a place where there's a team of people around you.
Yeah, you really need air cover, right? You really need some people to back you up, and you need to understand how to push in ways that won't have severe consequences, right? And I've pushed too hard on the wrong people in the past, and fortunately, it didn't cost me my job, but I did have to learn from that and adjust how I approach things. But to your point about not speaking up, I've been burned too many times by not speaking up, where I've said, I've known something was wrong, just kind of trusted that it would work out, and been wrong, and then had to face the ongoing operational consequences of that in production. And so if I see something is wrong, I'm going to say it's wrong, and I may have to try to find multiple different ways to say it, different approaches, different ways to communicate it, different ways to influence it. But I'm not going to give up on it, because I know otherwise I'm going to have to live with it.
And that's
yeah, my life's too short to live with stuff that's terrible.
I like that. Everyone should listen to that. On that brilliant note, please don't anyone just sit around in very terrible things. If there's anything that can be done, I know that not everyone has the ability to do it, but look, just listening to you being so passionate and fiery about things, I think is useful. People should hear more of that. And again, to remind people, Bryan, I think, would not disagree. You're tech in theory, but you're practically the people function from all points of view. What I'm trying to say, by means of attempting to be polite to the other side, is we have to sit at the same table, everyone, people who are in charge of people in theory and people who are not in charge of people in theory, Everybody has to talk about how do we do this people thing together. In particular today, with command and control up in the air, with no one showing up so you can look over their shoulder, with all of this conversation about our feelings being bust open and people leaving companies. We don't have an option anymore. We need to do the human work. And we have to ask people like yourself who have done it real life and have gotten their hands dirty. I bet you have 100 strategies for conflict resolution, collaboration, encouragement, all the things that are great ideas.
My friend Scott Nasello, when I was talking to him over beer several years ago, he said that we should have been getting psychology degrees instead of engineering degrees because we're trying to hack the biggest undocumented API. There's things I have that are, strategies, but a lot of times you really individuals are different, and you have to figure out what motivates them, so that you can actually help them. And it's kind of a slog. I've never actually had people report to me. I've been a leader, right? But I think something that's really useful to anybody who's wanting to do well with people is to not have any power and only have influence, right? Because I've almost never had any power at all. It's all just been I've had to grow influence, and you can get things done with power. You just get it done in a really crappy way.
Yeah.
But if you try to get things done with influence, you have to learn how to do it well.
Right. Very true. Very, very true. And you know what? One day maybe we get lucky, and those with power and those who are just battling with influence will sit down, and we'll all figure out what do we do so that we make these people happy. Not because we like them very much, but because they make us more money when they are.
They make us more money when they're happy. Yes. And also they save us from things like breaches. If you have a low trust environment, I'm not going to tell you that I've identified a security issue because I'm afraid of the consequences. And then suddenly we're in a massive lawsuit and we've exposed millions of users' information or whatever, right? Security requires that people are engaged and feel safe.
Thank you for saying that. It is indeed a security risk not to take care of your people's psychological safety and the ability to speak up. So
you don't have to care about people to care about people. You can be pragmatic and say, we need this as a business goal, so we need to care about people.
Very true. Very true. I love that message. Let's just kind of rally around it. People need to hear it. Thank you so very much for being with us today, Bryan. And I hope people listen to you, come ask you, find him online if he has time. He'll give you more of these tips, and listen to everything he has to say and read his stuff because it's amazing. Thanks a lot, Bryan.
Thanks so much, Joanna.
Thank you.